Welcome. My name is Dana Tibbitts. I'm an author and writer living in Lake Tahoe, and I'd like to ask you something. Are you troubled by the escalating wildfire crisis burning across the West every year, as if destroying millions of acres of forest is normal fire season? Me too. I've spent most of my adult life in wildfire-prone areas and been evacuated at least 3 times. It wasn't until the Caldor fire of 2021 that I saw that something was desperately wrong. Let's face it, burning several million acres a year is not normal. And infernos with the firepower of atomic bombs going off in our backyard? Insane. I decided I had to start writing about this, and that's how I connected with some of the most important voices in wildfire and land management today, because I was telling their story. Now, if an ordinary citizen like me can see this, so can you. The Declaration of National Wildfire Emergency you are about to hear comes from the National Wildfire Institute, a consortium of former USFS and land management leaders across America, each with 30 to 50 years of wisdom and expertise. What is the National Wildfire Emergency? How did we get here? And what exactly needs to be done about it?
My name is Bob Zybach. I live in Cresswell, Oregon, and have a PhD in the study of wildfires. For nearly 20 years, I operated a reforestation business, during which time my crews conducted several thousand acres of prescribed burns. In 1966, from that time until 20 years later, there was not a single wildfire in Western Oregon greater than 10,000 acres, and during which time my crews did nearly 20,000 acres of prescribed burns without a single escapement. In 1936, a forest fire destroyed the town of Bandon, Oregon, killing 10 residents. In 1951, part of Forks, Washington burned, along with 33,000 acres of forest. No one died, but it was the worst fire in state history. And that was mostly it for the Douglas fir region until the Clinton Plan was adopted. Then in 1987, the first wilderness areas from the 1960s began to catch fire, beginning with the 87,000-acre Silver Complex in the Kalmiopsis. Following the adoption of the 1993 Clinton Plan, new spotted owl management policies, our national forests began to burn too, in the hundreds of thousands of acres, as had been clearly predicted. These accurate predictions were made by scientists and forest managers with actual knowledge and experience, not by agency modelers or academic ecologists. They had nothing to do with climate, which has remained stable throughout the region. And now our towns are beginning to burn too, by the dozens from these fires. Then in 1999, Bella Vista burned, and in 2004, French Gulch burned, both in Shasta County. In 2017 and 18, 10 more California towns burned in forest fires and 125 people were killed. The deadly destruction of Paradise made national news, but 9 other towns also burned in Shasta, Trinity, Ventura, and Butte counties. That was more towns in 2 years than had burned in the previous 100. It got worse. In September 2020, 19 more towns burned, 9 in Oregon, 9 in California, and 1 in Washington, making 2020 the worst fire year in U.S. history since 1910, or even 1871. From 1902 until 1999, nearly 100 years, only 2 or 3 towns burned in the Douglas fir forest fires. Since then, after only 25 years of spotted owl critical habitat, more than 50 towns have burned, and almost all in a national forest wildfire. Following the fires of 1910, the U.S. Forest Service mission to protect U.S. homes and communities was greatly successful. But now we have a national emergency because of their setting fires to the very forests and properties we have paid them to protect.
I'm Joe Reddan, and I've been a forester for 47 years. Recently, a case came up, 2024, and it was Marin Audubon Society, the Federal Aviation Administration in the San Francisco Bay region. And the case was heard and appealed in the DC District Court. And the three justices looking at this case made an astonishing finding that 40 CFR 1500 to 1508, which are the regulations for implementing the National Environmental Policy Act, are not tied to any law at all, because they're issued by the Council on Environmental Quality, which is a executive office branch for the president, for the White House, but it's not established by any law. And so that's an astonishing finding. And it's as big as Looper Bright. The Organic Administration Act, it's the Organic Act. That's the Forest Service and its mission, okay, across the century or so and a quarter that it's been operating, and to protect our lands. In 1973, the Organic Administration Act was challenged by the Isaac Walton League in West Virginia. Okay, the case is known as Isaac Walton v. Butts, and we know it in the Forest Service as the Monongahela decision. But basically, in the Organic Administration Act, the secretary was allowed by the Congress to designate trees and to harvest old, large, and mature trees, okay? But the Monongahela was clear cutting, and they were only designating the boundaries, and they were taking intermediate age trees, which were neither large, mature, or dead. That caused a shutdown of the timber program. That's how powerful the Organic Administration Act is. And I think there's some room to work on this fire situation through what the act says about the depredations of fire and insects, that the secretary shall prevent them. That situation was solved by an amendment of the Resources Planning Act called the National Forest Management Act, and both the RPA and the NFMA, the National Forest Management Act, mention nothing about fire, only in the sense of fire damage to timber and salvage. So the underpinnings of the four corner laws do not really support this fire use, whether it's natural ignition fire and we're going to let it burn, or it's even prescribed burning. The federal land management agencies were to develop a cohesive strategy. And this is where I think our burning has taken off from, is this cohesive strategy where it says, we will learn to live with fire, and we will like it because we tell you so. The words are the common meanings. You don't need a Rosetta Stone to figure out what the what that word means. It is as it is in the text, and its plain meaning. That's the definition that the Supreme Court gave it years ago. And it says that it's for pre-suppression, emergency suppression, and post-suppression operations. And the actual word is emergency, and the second part of that is suppression, and suppression means to stop something. Okay, it means to end it. And so I think there's some rich history here that we can bring forward to a new administration, and to maybe a better listening Congress to get this situation with wildfire under control.
I have a BS in forestry and a BS in business administration. I've worked for several companies, Forest Service, Western Wood Products when it was an active association. My last position was Vice President Resources for California Cedar Products in Stockton. And I'm concerned, we're talking about primarily fire, but there's more to managing the national forest than worrying about fire. What we need to be emphasizing is, again, the Organic Act, what it spells out is communities, roads, schools, jobs, payroll, The lands are there to support the people. And these principles also apply to private lands, state lands, and even can apply to tribal lands. We should be looking after the people who are living in the communities rather than to lock things up. The Forest Service has failed in the last 20 years to manage the national forest. We can see that on the cut and sold reports are diminished almost to zero. What I want to say is emphasizing that the forests are there to support and do well for the people, not to be put up in shrines and locked up and walked away from.
I care deeply about these public lands. They are not USFS or Forest Service lands. They are our lands, public lands, and an agency has been selected to manage them for us. The U.S. Forest Service has reduced forest management and timber harvesting by 85% since the 1990s. Secretary of Agriculture Vilsack publicly announced in the Obama administration that there are over 50 million acres of dead and dying timber in Western National Forest, yet nothing has been done about it. Today, there are approximately 90 to 100 million acres of dead and dying, yet there is still no declaration of a disaster by the same Secretary Vilsack, in a second term. Again, Chief Randy Moore continues to keep managed wildfire in his toolkit. Where did this authority to violate the Threatened Endangered Species Act come from? Deliberate burning of threatened and endangered species habitat is considered a take under the Endangered Species Act. This is a serious question that should be prevented before the chief and Congress. The agency is misusing prescribed burning, primarily due to the burning in the fall when the dry fuel moistures are normally unpredictable winds prevail. Instead of in the spring where the generally higher fuel moisture conditions across the West. Well, 10,000 Americans die annually from smoke inhalation in California each and every year. And that's just tragic.
Well, I could talk about the smoke because I'm involved in athletic events. How does that affect our public schools? And our cross-country meets in the fall. We have 40 schools gather. We have 400 athletes, and we have to monitor the smoke. And a lot of it came from that shoe fire outside of Reddan. They fiddle-dicked around in that fire for 6 weeks, didn't put it out. Every day, more smoke rolls in. Well, they thought they were doing a good job, but they don't consider the people, the taxpayers who live in the community. I mean, you look at Southern Oregon, the Shakespeare Festival, they shut that down for years, $2 million lost. You look at the wine industry, Southern Oregon shut that down because of smoke. The Forest Service lives in their little fragmented world, and to say that, you know, they're taxpayer supported, but they don't give a blank about the taxpayers as far as I'm concerned. To the west of us, we've had 1 million acres burned on the Mendocino. To the east of us, another 1 million on the Plumas. To the north, I'm sure an easy 1 million on the Shasta Trinity, which never ceases to burn. The Camp Fire, if you're familiar with that, burned within 4 miles of our house. That was at least 4 years ago. And once that happens, the loss of 85 lives. And that was just the loss that was done that particular day. There's been a hell of a lot more people that died afterwards. There were some due to burns, and there were just some due to the stress of that fire. So, you know, as another substance, it all floats downhill. And after those fires, the Camp Fire, Chico has been in absolute semi-chaos due to the social problems we've had down here with homeless. It affects our whole community. It's never stopped affecting us. And then I think a couple of years later, Forest Service burned down the town of Berry Creek up the hill from us, and that was 16 more people. And you don't hear about if one firefighter loses his or her life, It's national. We lose 16 people in the town of Berry Creek and absolutely zero publicity on that. What slides under the media right now is the effect that it has on local people.
I'm Nadine Bailey, and I've been working on these issues for about 30 years. 70-acre clear cuts done by the loggers were going to destroy the environment and kill the owl. And anybody driving through the Dixie Forest and looking from Highway 44 south, you can see as far as the eye can see, it's nothing but a burnt landscape. That's a lot more than 70 acres. So, who are we kidding here? We didn't save the owl, and we certainly hurt the forests. The shoe fire started on October 9th. It was human caused. It was adjacent to another fire that was never cleaned up, so there was a lot of material there. So it started burning and was relatively small, could have been put out. They complained it was too rugged, too rocky, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is they drew a 4,000 acre box around it right off the bat. So we knew that it would go to 4,000 acres, and it did. So if you lived in Reddan, Shasta County, and I didn't realize it was going into Butte County as well, you went from October 9th until just when the wind started blowing and the storm started coming in with a haze of smoke over you. I believe in fire. Nobody loves to burn more than I do. I started working on my piles of dead and down material the day the first rain came, waiting for that moment that I could burn. We should not have a seasonal fire crew. They should come off of the fire line, and they should go back out to the forest, and they should start cleaning up the mess that was made with their fires. And maybe if they had to clean up the mess, if those LA and Alaska teams had to spend a month out burning that slash and getting that fiber down and that energy down to a safe level for these communities, maybe they would be a little hesitant to light it on fire in June, July, and August. If you want to fight fire on the national forest, then you can go clean up all winter long. We need better definitions of what good and managed fire are, because we all are feeling a different part of the elephant. I think there's good fire and there's bad fire, and there can be good fire during some months that can turn into really bad catastrophic fire. The judgment should be, are we impacting the soil? Are we impacting air quality? You should have to have a rubric that shows your impact on everything: water, soil, air quality, humans, everything, not just what made you feel good in the little box that you got to check because you treated 5,124 acres of the shoe fire.
When the Forest Service, through wind-driven monsters, wants to look me in the eye and tell me that that's treated lands when it burns at 2,000 degrees, as opposed to a normal fire, which often are good, as you all know, burns at 1,200 degrees. These nuclear fires cook everything. And they want to tell me that's treated acres. It will take at least 50 years to come back and destroy my rivers, my watersheds, my fish habitat. I think it was the American Land Council that really promoted the acreage and the wildlife loss of 22 critters for every single acre that's burned in a non-natural fire.
My name is Eldon Arnoff. My nickname is Tope, T-O-P-E. And I have been involved in the forest industry all my life. I received a degree in biological forestry from the University of California in 1956. In 1965, I became manager of a sawmill manufacturing housing studs in Willits, California. I would like to point out timberland management necessitates the conversion to a product. If I was to give you each an acre of forest, standing on your acre are merchantable trees that are measured to be 20,000 board feet. You have a medical emergency needing $2,000. In this case, if you were offered $100 per thousand for your trees by a sawmill, you'd probably take it. If that sawmill was not there, what is the value of your trees? A current example that has occurred in Missoula, Montana. In the area around Missoula, there was once a pulp mill, a particle board plant, and sawmills. Without these facilities, there's a large volume of timber that now has potentially a native value becoming a liability. Both private, tribal, and public timber, which could be worth billions of dollars. Located north of Missoula to the Canadian border, west to Bonners Ferry, Idaho, there is no ability to convert to products of the timber in that area. Another thing, due to closure of sawmills over the past approximately 2 years, 3 to 4 billion board feet of lumber production has been eliminated. This will increase the cost of homes and prevent the usual use of catastrophic impacts. As a nation, we have lost jobs, skills, and communities who were involved in forest management through their efforts. We no longer manage our forest land. Our only tool available is fire, which we as human beings have little or no control of.
I'm Jim Petersen. I've been a working journalist for 62 years. I'm also the founder of the nonprofit Evergreen Foundation. I've written several books, most notably first put out The Fire. Federal forests hold too many trees for the carrying capacity of the land. Trees are dying annually by the millions. Mortality now exceeds growth in most of the national forests in the 11 western states. Our federal lands are a national treasure. Our cultural, spiritual, historic, and economic roots are buried deep in the soil. When we leave these forests to nature, as so many people today seem to want to do, we get whatever nature serves up, which can be pretty devastating at times. But with forestry, we have options and a degree of predictability not found in nature. The easiest science-based fix necessitates managing our forests and rangeland in a way that looks quite similar to the way that Indian tribes that own land manage their land. To understand what this might look like, consider the wisdom of Oshkosh, chief of the Menominee tribe from 1827 to 1858. Here's what he said. Start with the rising sun and work toward the setting sun. Take only the mature trees, the sick trees, and the trees that have fallen. When you reach the end of the reservation, turn and cut from the setting sun to the rising sun, and the trees will last forever. Thank you.
My name is William Derr. I was with the Forest Service for 38 years, 17 years in fire management, and 21 years as a special agent. The last 18 of those years as a special agent in charge California region. I would like to give a little background on the 10 a.m. policy. 10 a.m. policy originated in the early 30s and was formalized in 1935. The reason for it was that for years when there was a relatively wet cycle, the Forest Service, because of lack of funding, was allowing most fires to burn, thinking that they were beneficial. The weather cycle changed, countryside warmed up, and by the 30s into 1935, they were spending more money and burning more acres than they wanted to. So the 10 a.m. policy directed the Forest Service to plan to suppress all fires by 10 a.m. on the day following discovery. It's the key to getting on top of the wildfire crisis. Early detection, immediate aggressive suppression action, appropriate cleanup of the woods afterward, and restoring the land is where we need to be. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Phil Aune. I have a 50-year career in the forestry arena, 37 years with the U.S. Forest Service, with my last assignment as 13 years as a research program manager. The first point I see is the vast majority of the dead trees are not being salvaged. The first legacy that we're going to see is thousands and thousands of acres of black standing trees. Trees will ultimately die and fall to the ground and become fuel for the inevitable next wildfire, making it even more difficult to control. And more importantly, all that fuel will now be on the surface. And as surface fuels will concentrate the heat on the upper end of the soil profile, severely damaging the soil. So it's a long-term productivity effect that no one has really researched extensively to follow up exactly what's happening to these wildfires, especially the reburns that have occurred in wildfire areas. And here's what the National Forest Management Act said in Section 6(1)(d). It is the policy of Congress that all forested lands in the National Forest System shall be maintained in appropriate forest cover. Shall be maintained in appropriate forest cover. Where in the heck is that going on? The lands that are not actively reforested will change into brush and hardwood communities for the next 75 to 100 years. Yes, they will naturally regenerate, but how much time do you have? How much time do our children have? How much time do our grandchildren? This is a real issue. We're leaving black forest and brush fields in what once was magnificent conifer forest. We don't have to do that. We have the knowledge and skills from science-based reforestation. And I can speak personally from that as a research program manager whose mission was to look at the entire reforestation cycle for the last 13 years of my career. Joe mentioned the Organic Act of 1897, when Congress provided, and one of the key purposes was to provide for the protection and maintenance of our national forest. How can we look the public in the eye and say, we are providing for the protection and maintenance? The second major factor was protect the headwaters of navigable streams. Where on God's green earth have they ever protected the headwaters of navigable streams with using concepts like managing wildfires for resource benefits, which is just a euphemism for not fighting fires promptly?
I'm James Marsh. I live in Victor, Montana. I hold a bachelor's and master's degrees in forestry and watershed management, forest hydrology. I spent 17 years with the U.S. Forest Service. The reduced management over the last 35 years, based on the Forest Service and BLM and others, has led to overcrowded forest, increased stems per acre, further exacerbating the wildfire risk. Federal agencies have shifted to natural fire strategies, allowing wildfires to burn unchecked, resulting in mega fires with no salvage logging, fuel load reductions, and reforestation efforts have been minimal, particularly on public lands, and leaving communities vulnerable. It was kind of humorous that the chief made a comment that, well, he was going to focus on for $5 million on trying to get our industry back engaged again. Well, that's like putting a Band-Aid on a gut shot wound. One of the key turning points, which I was involved in, and that's why I left the Forest Service, was the Northwest Forest Plan, which reduced timber harvest to 75% on all forest lands, primarily because of spotted owls, which is a hoax. The intention was to allow 25% of those to remain as logging lands to provide funding to the Forest Service and to counties for schools and roads, etc. But the environmental groups, they just then focused on that 25%, and they filed thousands of lawsuits to stop that. Simultaneously, climate change has taken place, and prolonged drought has exacerbated issues like insect infestations, disease outbreaks, excessive forest density stems per acre, and amplifying the risk. Policies such as allowing wildfires to naturally spread have resulted in unprecedented megafires followed by inadequate salvage logging, no fuel reduction other than what's burnt now, and reforestation has completely avoided. Except for if you look at the private land Forest Service boundaries, private lands they're reforestating, they're planting and everything else. Forest Service is not doing anything. All the standing timber that's burnt and standing dead, it just keeps reburning over and over and over again.
I'm Roger Jaegel, served a career in the Forest Service, primarily in fire control, as we called it then. We all need to assure that the legacy, the beauty, and the bounty of our national forests are preserved. And somehow, in the last 30 years or so, a lot of the things we did and fought for our entire careers have been undone. And it's very, very sad to see. Multiple fires on the same landscape are converting our once prime forest to brush and invasive weedy vegetation. It is estimated that it is now costing the American public over $1 trillion a year to manage the fire situation. Fuels management work on the public lands is still not near the pace and scale it needs to be to protect rural communities and rural forests. We have areas around these towns now, because no fuels work has been able to occur, that have hundreds of tons of dead, dying, and drying fuel that they're going to have to deal with. One of the burnouts on the August complex, it burned about 70,000 acres of old growth trees, over 100 spotted owl nesting cores. And if I could, I would turn the computer around and show you my refrigerator, which has my 6 great grandchildren. And if we can't do it for anything else, let's try to save our national forest for them.
Hi, my name's Frank Carroll. I'm a wildfire consultant and a veteran of the Forest Service. I've concluded that there needs to be a dramatic change at the top of the Forest Service that includes a new chief and new principal officers and the national leadership team, because there are 3 immediate reforms that are necessary. And those reforms need to happen within the next 24 months. The new leaders must quickly pivot to a regulated, transparent, and accountable fire suppression policy that prioritizes public safety, agency accountability, and environmental protection. The Forest Service and its wildfire management policies aimed at sustainable outputs and outcomes in perpetuity, meaning living functional forests, have been replaced by alternate fire suppression strategies like monitoring, which means let burn. There is currently no legal basis for intentional wildfire use and no adequate or comprehensive effort to document and disclose cumulative effects. Alternative arrangements from CEQ have now fallen away, along with the Chevron deference, both of which provided cover for current policies previously, and now they have no effect in law. The second reform is in the fire suppression methods that we need to reconsider. Common fire retardant chemistries pose environmental and health concerns due to their compositions, which contribute to nutrient pollution, threaten water quality, inhibit plant growth, and pose potential risks to the public and firefighters. Continuing lawsuits for the past 15 years increasingly threaten the viability of what should be one of our most effective suppression and prevention tools. The third reform I think we need to emphasize in the relatively short time that the administration may have to make real change is that an otherwise promising agency contracting system called VIPER, the Virtual Incident Procurement System, has been preempted and neutralized. The agency organization in charge of VIPER insists on forcing a potentially effective computer-based system that would quickly order equipment and services for emergencies into a 1960-style review and authorization maze of old-school Soviet-style bureaucracy. Urgent reform of the incident management system for wildfire response is needed by separating emergency and non-emergency operations, promoting district-level contracting, and increasing efficiency through proactive planning and resource management within the next 24 months.
I hope this conversation has been helpful today. These experts represent some of the best and the brightest in the business of forest management, preservation, and wildfire. On behalf of our team, thank you for listening today. And remember, your voice matters.